My name is Serenia. I was the woman who believed in loyalty, in love, in the idea that when you build a life with someone, you build it on trust. At least, that is what I thought before I learned the truth. It began with the house. A beach house. Not a palace, not a mansion, but a modest place sitting on the edge of the water, with white shutters and a porch that opened to the endless sea. It was supposed to be our sanctuary. I imagined summers with children running barefoot on the sand, quiet evenings with wine, holidays lit with laughter. But now, when I think of that house, I no longer see the dream I built. I see his betrayal. The first moment of suspicion came not from something dramatic, but from silence. Marcus used to share everything. But suddenly, when he said he was working late or going out with friends, the house key that always hung on the rack was missing. First, I thought nothing of it. People misplace keys. But then on weekends, he began leaving earlier and returning later, always smelling faintly of salt water. I did not confront him immediately. I wanted to believe the man I loved, the man who looked me in the eye and promised forever. But something deep inside me stirred. A voice telling me that the silence was hiding something louder than words. One afternoon while folding laundry, I felt the weight of a set of receipts left inside his jeans. Paper crumpled but clear enough to read. Gas stations near the coast. A wine shop by the boardwalk. A bakery that sold croissants with strawberries on top. The details screamed routine. Familiarity. Not a one-time trip. I stared at those papers for hours, my hands trembling. My mind wanted to believe in his innocence, but my body felt the truth. He was going somewhere without me, and he was going often. The night that sealed it came when I decided to test his words. He told me he would be working late at the office, a deadline hanging over him. I knew better. I followed. I drove behind him as he pulled out of the driveway, careful, cautious, heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. He did not head to the office. He drove to the coast. To our beach house. I parked 2 streets away and walked. My hands clenched at my sides, every step heavy. I wanted to turn back, to erase the suspicion, to force myself into ignorance. But the glow of lights inside the windows kept me moving closer. And then I saw her. Through the open curtains I watched her laugh. A woman I had never seen before, sitting at my kitchen table, sipping wine from a glass that was supposed to be mine. Marcus leaned toward her, his hand grazing hers. He was smiling in a way that had grown rare with me. I froze outside in the cool ocean breeze, my whole world tilting. My husband had turned our dream into his hiding place. He had hidden her inside the very walls where I had planned our future. That was the night something inside me broke, but something else was born. Not rage. Not desperation. Something sharper. Something patient. It was the night I decided. If he could hide her in the beach house, I would take the beach house from both of them. Not with fire. Not with screams. But with law. With precision. With revenge he would never see coming. And when it arrived, he would be the one standing outside, locked out, watching as everything slipped away. Cliffhanger. The beach house was no longer a home. It became my battlefield. I kept telling myself I was imagining things. That was easier than believing the man I had trusted with my life was capable of hiding another woman in the beach house we once dreamed of together. But denial has a short life. And mine ended the moment I found the first crack in his perfect story. It started with the receipts. One morning while folding the laundry, a slip of paper fell from his jeans pocket. A wine bar 2 towns away. A date stamped on a night when he had sworn he was working late. My pulse quickened as I traced the ink with my finger. Why would he drive all the way out there, unless he wanted to keep his tracks far from me? The second crack came a week later. He left his phone on the nightstand when he went to shower. Normally, I respected his privacy. But this time, the glow of a message lit up the screen. Beach house was perfect last night. Can't wait for the next time. The words burned into my brain. My chest tightened, my stomach twisted. He had given our sanctuary, the place we once painted together, to her. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I swallowed my rage, folded it neatly, and tucked it behind my calmest smile. If I exploded too soon, he'd cover his tracks, erase the messages, hide the evidence. I needed more than a gut feeling. I needed proof that no one could deny. So I began watching. Every time he said he was meeting a client, I wrote it down. Every time he left the house later than usual, I checked the clock. The pattern became clear: Fridays. Every other Friday. He vanished into the night with excuses that grew thinner by the week. That was when I remembered the spare key to the beach house. He thought he was clever, keeping the main set in his office drawer. But I had the one we hid in the garden years ago, back when trust still lived between us. I drove there one evening, my hands shaking as I slid the key into the lock. The house smelled of perfume that wasn't mine. Soft laughter floated from upstairs, but when I climbed the steps, the rooms were empty. They had already gone. Still, the evidence was everywhere. 2 wine glasses in the sink. A scarf draped across the armchair. A half-empty bottle of champagne resting on the counter like a trophy. I snapped pictures of everything. My hands steadied as the camera clicked. I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was an investigator. The next time I went further. I parked a block away, waited in the shadows, and watched the lights flicker on. Through the curtain I saw him. My husband. Holding her. Kissing her as though the vows he had made to me were dust. I wanted to burst inside, scream until the walls cracked, but I forced myself still. Because rage would not win me justice. Only strategy would. I filmed them from the window. I caught every stolen touch, every lie disguised as romance. The more I recorded, the calmer I became. Because with each frame, I was gathering the power he thought I would never hold. But then something unexpected happened. As I packed up my camera to leave, headlights flared in the driveway. Another car pulled up. A man stepped out. My breath caught. Was she betraying him too? Or was this yet another player in a story I had only begun to unravel? I crouched lower, my camera trembling in my hands. Whoever he was, he walked straight to the door like he belonged there. The front door opened. My husband and his mistress froze. And in that stillness, in that heavy silence, I realized. This was bigger than I imagined. Much bigger. The man at the door was tall, broad-shouldered, and angry in a way that only someone betrayed could be. His fists were clenched at his sides, and even from my hiding spot, I could see the storm in his eyes. My husband froze mid-step, his mistress standing behind him in a silk robe that was definitely not hers to flaunt. She looked startled, then guilty, then suddenly defensive. "Why are you here?" she snapped, though her voice trembled. The man didn't answer at first. He just stared at both of them, breathing hard like he had been holding himself together for far too long. Finally, he spat the words out. "Because I know everything." My blood chilled. Everything. Did he mean her affair with my husband? Or something else entirely? I pressed myself deeper into the shadows by the bushes, heart racing as I filmed through the sliver of open curtain. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His voice rose, sharp enough to cut glass. "You thought I wouldn't find out? That you could sneak off here and play house while I worked double shifts?" It hit me then. This man wasn't just anyone. He was her partner. Maybe her husband. She had built her own web of lies, and now it was colliding headfirst with mine. My husband stammered, trying to smooth things over. But the stranger was not in the mood to be handled. He shoved him back a step. My husband's fake confidence cracked. He wasn't used to being challenged by someone who didn't fall for his polished charm. The mistress, wide-eyed, clutched the robe tighter around her. "Please calm down," she pleaded. "You're misunderstanding." But it was too late for lies. The man pointed toward the glasses, the champagne bottle, the scattered clothes. "Do I look like a fool? You said you were at your sister's. And you?" He turned on my husband. "You promised her he was just a friend's housemate." The room was spinning with betrayal layered on betrayal. I could hardly believe my ears. My husband wasn't only cheating on me. He was apparently entangled in her lies too. I steadied the camera and whispered to myself, "Perfect. Keep talking. Give me everything." My hands trembled less now. The rage that had once clouded me was sharpening into focus. Every second of this chaos was another nail in his coffin, another brick in the case I was quietly building. But then something happened I hadn't expected. The stranger turned toward the window. For a terrifying moment I thought he saw me. His eyes lingered on the curtain, and my breath caught in my throat. If he stepped outside, if he found me crouched there, my entire plan could crumble before it even began. But instead he stormed past them, muttering curses under his breath. He yanked the door open, slammed it shut behind him, and disappeared into the night. I stayed frozen, counting to 30 before I dared move. Inside, my husband sank into a chair, running his hands through his hair. The mistress tried to comfort him, whispering, "It'll be fine. He won't say anything." But I knew better. I had seen the fury in that man's eyes. He wasn't the kind to stay silent. And suddenly I realized something chilling. I wasn't the only one who wanted revenge. When the man stormed away from the beach house, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled, I stayed crouched in the shadows. My breath was shallow, my heart hammering. But behind that fear was a spark of something new. An ally. I had spent weeks gathering fragments of proof, building a case that could not be ignored. But here was someone else with his own fire, his own reasons to destroy them. The question was simple. Could I trust him? The next morning I followed a hunch. I returned to the beach house early, hoping the mistress would still be there. Instead, I found her partner sitting in a rusted pickup truck parked across the street. His jaw was clenched, his eyes bloodshot as though he hadn't slept. For a moment I considered walking away. Approaching him meant revealing myself, risking that he might lash out in anger. But then he looked up and our eyes met through the windshield. Something silent passed between us. Recognition, fury, betrayal mirrored back at me. I walked toward him. He rolled down the window slowly, suspicion etched into his face. "You were there," he said flatly. Not a question, an accusation. I nodded. "And you saw it all." For a long moment we just stared at each other. Two strangers bound by the same wound. Finally he exhaled. "Name's Marcus." I hesitated before giving mine. "Celine." The name sounded foreign in the morning air, but steady. Marcus leaned back, rubbing his temples. "She told me he was her business partner's tenant. Said they only talked about work." I guess I wanted to believe it. Until I tracked her phone here last night. The raw honesty in his tone disarmed me. This wasn't just rage, it was devastation. I leaned against the truck door. "He's my husband. And I've been gathering proof for weeks. Last night? That was the final piece." Marcus gave a bitter laugh. "So what now? We just let them keep playing us?" His words sent a shiver down my spine. I had been planning my revenge carefully, methodically. But with him there was an opportunity to strike harder, louder. Together we could rip the mask off both of them. But alliances are dangerous, especially when born from anger. "I don't want chaos," I said carefully. "I want justice. I want him exposed so thoroughly he can't crawl his way out of it." Marcus studied me for a long time. Finally he nodded. "Then maybe we can help each other." We exchanged numbers. My fingers trembled as I typed his name into my phone. It felt like crossing a line I couldn't return from. Over the next week, Marcus and I compared notes. He had bank statements, suspicious receipts, even photographs of her slipping out of hotels. I had videos, text messages, and the deed to the beach house that proved my husband had been funding her life with money that was supposed to be ours. Piece by piece, we built a puzzle that painted a picture so damning it left no room for doubt. Yet even as we worked, I couldn't shake the unease. Marcus's rage was volcanic, unpredictable. He spoke often of making them pay. His voice sharp with venom. I, on the other hand, wanted precision. A revenge that would hold up in the cold light of day. Legal, undeniable, inescapable. And I began to wonder. Would our visions of justice clash when the time came? That doubt grew heavier one night when Marcus called me unexpectedly. His voice was ragged, slurred with drink. "I'm not waiting anymore," he growled. "Tomorrow I confront them. Both of them. I'll drag them into the street if I have to." My stomach twisted. If he acted rashly, everything I had worked for could collapse. "No," I insisted. "Not yet. If you want real payback, you wait. We do this my way." There was silence on the line. Then a low laugh. "You're colder than I thought." I didn't answer. Because he was right. After Marcus's drunken call, I realized something. If I wanted my revenge to be clean, sharp, and undeniable, I couldn't rely on anyone else's rage. His fury might be useful, but it was also dangerous. One wrong move from him, and everything I had carefully collected could burn to ashes. So I began to build my own plan. By day, I played the role of the perfect wife. Smiling at family dinners, attending neighborhood gatherings, even laughing at his hollow jokes. But behind that mask I was working. Every evening after he fell asleep, I sat at my desk, files spread out before me like pieces of a battlefield map. The beach house was the key. That place wasn't just where he hid her. It was the symbol of his betrayal. He had bought it behind my back, siphoning money from our joint accounts, thinking I would never find out. But I had found out. And I held the proof. The property records were in his name, but the payments were traced directly to our marital funds. That gave me leverage, legal leverage. Enough to prove financial misconduct in court. Enough to shatter his reputation as the charming, successful man he pretended to be. Still, I wanted more than a courtroom battle. I wanted the truth to explode in public so that every friend, every colleague, every family member who believed his lies would see who he really was. That's when I thought of the annual gala. Every year, his company hosted a lavish event at the downtown hotel ballroom. The lights, the cameras, the applause, it was his stage, the night he basked in attention. He had already been bragging for weeks about the speech he was going to give. What better place to destroy him? But I couldn't do it alone. I needed allies who could help me set the stage without tipping him off. So I reached out to two people I trusted more than anyone. My sister Elena and my oldest friend Naomi. I invited them over one evening, my hands shaking as I laid out the evidence. Text messages, receipts, photographs, the property files. At first, they were silent, their faces pale. Then Naomi slammed her hand on the table. He thinks he can walk all over you? Use your money, your life, and parade her around like nothing? No. We'll make him choke on his lies. Elena, always the calm one, leaned forward. But if you do this wrong, he'll twist it. He'll play the victim. You need precision, Celine. We need to strike once and make it impossible for him to recover. She was right. Precision. That word echoed in my mind. Together we mapped it out. On the night of the gala, I would take the stage before his big speech. I would reveal everything, projected on the very screens he had arranged to display his triumphs. Naomi worked in event planning, which meant she had contacts at the hotel. She offered to help me slip into the control room. Elena promised to stand in the crowd, ready to capture the reactions on her phone. And Marcus? I debated telling him. In the end I decided not to. His thirst for chaos would only jeopardize the plan. If he wanted revenge, he'd have to find it on his own. But even as I finalized the details, unease gnawed at me. My husband had always been slippery, clever in ways that made people overlook his faults. What if he sensed something? What if he tried to silence me before the gala? The thought kept me awake at night. I knew I had to stay 2 steps ahead no matter what. One evening, as I tucked the evidence back into its folder, I caught my reflection in the darkened window. My face was pale, my eyes sharp. I barely recognized myself. But then again, maybe this was the real me, the woman who would no longer be mocked, cheated, or hidden from the truth. The gala was only 2 weeks away, and every beat of my heart carried me closer to the night when his mask would finally shatter. The night of the gala arrived like a storm I had been waiting for. The hotel ballroom glittered with chandeliers, the sound of clinking glasses and soft jazz filling the air. Everyone was dressed in their finest, the city's elite, his colleagues, the people who believed every polished word that came out of his mouth. I stood near the back at first, my gown simple but elegant, chosen deliberately so I wouldn't outshine the truth I was about to reveal. My sister Elena was already in place with her phone, disguised as just another guest. Naomi was hidden in the control booth, her headset whispering updates into the tiny earpiece tucked against my skin. Everything was ready. The files, the photos, the messages, they would appear on the massive screens the moment I gave the signal. And yet something felt off. I watched him move through the crowd, his smile wide, his laughter booming. He was holding her hand. She was here. The woman he had hidden in the beach house. The woman he thought I'd never uncover. The woman who lived off the life he stole from me. She was dressed in a shimmering silver dress, clinging to him like she had already won. My chest tightened. Her presence wasn't part of the plan. If she was here, then she was about to be paraded in front of everyone as his special guest. It made the betrayal sting sharper. But it also meant one thing. When the truth came out, she would fall with him. I whispered into my mic, "Naomi, are we set?" Her voice crackled back. "We're ready, but there's a problem." He's changed the order. His speech is first, not last. My stomach dropped. That wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to build himself up, let the whole room bathe in his false glory. Then I would destroy him. If he spoke first and I interrupted, it could look messy, desperate. Worse, the control booth might not have enough time to switch the feeds. Elena caught my eye from across the room, her brow furrowed. She had heard the update through her linked phone. She mouthed, "What do we do?" For a moment doubt stabbed me. Should I wait? Should I back out entirely and regroup? My pulse thundered in my ears, my palms slick with sweat. Then I looked at him again. He raised his glass, clinking it loudly to gather attention. The crowd hushed, their eyes on him, their admiration glowing. His mistress smiled at his side, as if she had already been accepted. That was when the fear burned away. No, this wasn't his stage. Not anymore. I whispered back, "Naomi, override him. When I step forward, you flip the screens. No matter what." She hesitated, then whispered, "Understood." He began his speech. He talked about loyalty, about building a future, about the importance of family and honesty. Each word was a dagger dipped in poison, each lie rehearsed to perfection. The crowd nodded, clapped, smiled. I stepped forward, my heels clicking against the polished floor. The sound was sharp, deliberate, cutting through the hush. His eyes caught mine mid-sentence, and for a split second I saw it, the flicker of panic behind his confident mask. He knew, but it was too late. I reached the edge of the stage, my voice clear and steady. "Funny," I said, loud enough for the microphone to catch, "that you speak about honesty when every dollar, every moment, every promise you've made has been a lie." Gasps rippled through the room. His mistress's hand slipped from his arm. And then, right on cue, the screens lit up. The texts. The photographs. The property records of the beach house. His voice messages. Every piece of evidence I had collected now loomed over him. 10 feet high, impossible to deny. The crowd turned on him in real time. Whispers erupted. Phones rose to capture it all. His carefully crafted image shattered like glass underfoot. But just as I felt the satisfaction surge, Naomi's voice snapped in my ear. "Celine, we've got a situation. Security's heading for the booth. They know someone tampered with the system. I can't hold it much longer." My victory was hanging by a thread. The ballroom exploded into chaos. Gasps sharpened into shouts, whispers into pointed accusations. I could see his face draining of color as the images flickered across the massive screens. His arm wrapped around her at the beach house balcony, his signature on hidden financial transfers, his voice promising her weekends in the house he bought with my money. For years, he had played the role of the charming, respectable man. Tonight I ripped the mask off. He reached for the microphone, his words stammering. These are lies, fabricated. But the crowd was no longer with him. Phones were out. People were recording every desperate flinch of his mouth, every flicker of panic in his eyes. His mistress shrank back, trying to melt into the shadows, but the spotlight caught her silver dress, and she froze like a deer exposed on an empty highway. I stepped onto the stage, heels steady, voice cutting through the noise like a blade. No fabrication. No lies. This is who you are. A man who drained accounts, bought property behind my back, and paraded his mistress in a house he never earned. Tell me, do you want me to read your texts aloud? Or should we let the audience decide which lie they like best? The room erupted again. Laughter now. Harsh, disbelieving laughter directed at him. The same colleagues who once clapped at his speeches now shook their heads in disgust. He lunged toward me, grabbing at the microphone, but before his hand touched it, 2 security guards appeared at the edge of the stage. For a second I thought they would protect him, but instead they positioned themselves between us. One leaned close, whispering urgently, "Ma'am, we've got everything on file. Keep talking. We'll hold them off." Naomi's voice rang in my ear. "Celine, I'm being escorted out. But the files are still running. I locked the system before they found me. He can't stop it." Relief surged through me, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I raised the microphone higher, eyes locked on him. "You planned to steal from me. To humiliate me. To hide her while you told me we were building a future. But you forgot something. I don't break quietly. I don't fade into the shadows. I fight. The audience was silent now, hanging on every word. My voice filled the ballroom, echoing against crystal chandeliers. You told me I was naive, that I was too trusting, that I would never have the strength to leave you, to expose you. But tonight, I gestured toward the screens where another set of texts appeared. His mistress begging him to ditch the wife and promising to keep him entertained. Tonight, the truth walks free. And your lies are what's trapped. The gasp from the mistress broke the silence. She tried to grab his arm, but he shook her off violently. His mask had fully slipped now, red-faced, snarling, sweat pouring down his temple. Enough, he shouted, his voice cracking. This doesn't prove anything. She's just bitter. She's twisting everything. But the room didn't believe him. His boss stood near the front, face pale, lips thin. I saw the moment he realized. His career was over. I leaned forward, microphone steady, my final strike landing with perfect clarity. You said you built this empire on trust. I say you built it on sand. And now, in front of everyone, your empire collapses. The screens froze on one final image. A bank statement showing the siphoned funds, his name bold at the bottom. The evidence was undeniable. The audience erupted. Not with applause but with fury. His colleagues walked out. A woman threw her drink onto the floor with a splash, muttering, I knew it. Phones captured every angle, sealing his disgrace permanently online. But as the storm raged around him, he turned his eyes to me, pure venom in his stare. This isn't over. He hissed, low enough only I could hear. My pulse skipped, but I didn't flinch. I held his gaze, calm, steady, victorious. Oh yes, I whispered back. It is. And yet, as the crowd pressed forward, demanding answers, calling out his lies, I felt the tension twist again. Something told me he wasn't going to walk away quietly. The moment I stepped off the stage, the ballroom fractured into pieces. People weren't whispering anymore, they were shouting. Chairs scraped against marble, glasses clattered to the floor. The smell of spilled wine mingling with expensive perfume. The illusion of control he had built for years crumbled in minutes. His boss, Mr. Graham, a man who had once toasted him at every gala, stormed up to the front. His voice sliced through the noise like a knife. Is this true? Did you siphon company funds into a personal property? Into a mistress's playhouse? He stammered, eyes darting like a trapped animal. No. It's taken out of context. But the bank statement still glowed on the screen behind him. Numbers didn't lie. And the silence that fell in response was more damning than any accusation. Someone shouted from the crowd, You're finished, Marcus. Another voice chimed in, You disgust us. And then laughter. Cruel, sharp, contagious. The same people who once lined up to shake his hand now laughed at his downfall. Phones filmed every second. The red glow of recording lights capturing his disgrace for the internet to devour. His mistress, trembling in her sequin dress, tried to escape through the side doors. But the crowd spotted her, and the whispers turned into boos. A woman muttered loud enough for the room to hear. She thought she'd win. Look at her now. Security moved in, not for me but for him. They weren't protecting him anymore. They were escorting him out. His protests echoed against the walls. You can't do this. I built this company. I made you all. But no one listened. I stayed at the edge of the stage watching him unravel. It wasn't just rage in his eyes, it was fear. Real fear. The kind of fear that comes when a man realizes every door he thought he controlled is slamming shut. Beside me, Naomi whispered urgently, The live feed is trending already. People are screen grabbing everything. He can't hide this. Not anymore. It hit me like a wave. This wasn't just a local scandal. By morning, the entire industry would know. His name would be synonymous with fraud, betrayal, humiliation. The mistress made one last desperate attempt to slip out unnoticed, but someone grabbed her wrist and shoved a phone in her face. Smile for the camera. You ruined a marriage for this? Was it worth it? Her face crumpled. She pulled free, running out barefoot, her heels abandoned on the ballroom floor. Marcus, though, wasn't allowed to run. Security pinned him between the velvet ropes, his tie hanging loose, his voice breaking. This is slander. She set me up. I'll sue every one of you. But the evidence looped on the screens, unrelenting. The crowd no longer argued. They simply stared at him with disgust. I stepped forward one last time, my voice calm but cutting. You said this wasn't over. But look around, Marcus. It already is. Gasps rippled again because at that exact moment, another slide appeared on the screen's emails. Naomi had cued them perfectly. They showed not just betrayal in love but betrayal in business. Double contracts, false signatures, promises made to investors that contradicted everything in public statements. It wasn't only a marital scandal anymore. It was financial ruin. Mr. Graham's face turned red. Get him out of here. He's not just fired. He's finished. The guards dragged him toward the exit. Cameras followed, the crowd roaring with shock, delight, disgust. I should have felt triumphant, but there was a new heaviness in the air. Revenge wasn't neat. It was messy, raw, public. And as he was hauled past me, his eyes locked on mine. For the first time he didn't spit venom. He whispered one word. Why? My chest tightened. But I didn't flinch. Because you underestimated me. And then he was gone, swallowed by the crowd, by the chaos, by the truth. But the fallout wasn't over. Phones kept buzzing. Guests whispered to one another. Some looked at me with admiration, others with unease. They had seen justice served, but they had also seen the power of exposure. And as I stood there, breathing in the remnants of champagne and scandal, I realized the night wasn't finished. Tomorrow would bring headlines, lawyers' statements. Tomorrow would bring the reckoning. And I was ready for it. The morning after the beach house sale felt like the calm after a storm. But calm does not mean peace. My phone buzzed nonstop. Calls from relatives, messages from mutual friends, even voicemails from people I barely knew. All asking if the rumors were true. The rumor being that Marcus had been living a double life, hiding another woman in what everyone thought was our sanctuary. I opened the curtains of my apartment and let the sunlight pour in, reminding myself that I had taken back control. Still, the fallout was only beginning. Marcus had tried calling 12 times. Each call went unanswered. His voicemails were no longer pleading. They were angry, frantic. You've ruined me, he shouted in one of them. You think this makes you the winner? You've destroyed everything. I played that message 3 times, not because it hurt, but because it confirmed what I already knew. His empire was crumbling, not mine. At noon, I met with the lawyer who had finalized the sale. She slid the final paperwork across the table. The ink was dry, the beach house legally no longer ours, or rather, his hiding place. She said, he cannot contest this, Alicia. Every document is airtight. If he tries to fight it, he will lose. The weight that lifted off my shoulders was indescribable. For the first time in years, I did not feel like a shadow in my own marriage. I felt like the author of my own story. But the reactions from others were a storm of their own. My sister, who had once adored Marcus, called me in tears, apologizing for doubting my instincts. She said, I thought you were paranoid. I thought you were reading into things. I should have believed you. Hearing that was bittersweet. Then came the harder part. Seeing Marcus face the consequences in real time. That evening, a mutual friend invited me to a small dinner gathering. I almost declined, but something inside me told me to go. And I am glad I did. When I walked in, whispers swirled. Some people avoided my eyes. Others came straight to me, placing a hand on my arm, whispering, good for you. Or, he had it coming. Marcus was there. He looked different, drawn, restless, almost hollow. The confident man who once laughed the loudest now sat alone at the far end of the table, fiddling with his phone as if it could shield him from the truth everyone now knew. When his eyes finally met mine, the silence was sharp. He stood as though he might try to explain himself, but no words came. Just the weight of shame. The other woman was not with him. That, in itself, spoke volumes. Had she abandoned him now that his secret life had collapsed? Or was he hiding her again? Clinging to denial even as the world saw through him? Dinner passed in a blur of forced conversation. Marcus never regained his footing. Every time he tried to interject with a joke or a story, the air shifted uncomfortably. Nobody laughed. Nobody wanted to be complicit in his facade anymore. As dessert was served, I leaned back in my chair, savoring not the sweetness on my plate but the quiet power of vindication. Marcus had stolen years of my trust, my joy, my energy. But now, the narrative was no longer his to spin. When I left the dinner, heads turned. I walked out with dignity, my heels clicking against the floor like a drumbeat of finality. Behind me, Marcus stayed seated, shoulders slumped, unable to follow. The day after the sale had not been the end of his unraveling. It was only the beginning. And I knew the true ending would come not with lawyers, not with whispers, but with a confrontation that could not be avoided. The final reckoning did not come with a scream, came with a knock. 3 days after the dinner, Marcus arrived at my apartment unannounced. Hair uncombed, tie loose, eyes rimmed in red. I opened the door because I prefer truth in daylight. He stepped inside and stopped, as if the air itself would not hold him. He glanced at the bare walls, the calm plants, the stack of legal folders on the console table. He had always hated that table. He said it looked like a judge. Tonight it looked like a mirror. Say it, I told him. Say the thing you came here to say. He tried anger first. You humiliated me. I put the truth where it could breathe, I said. You brought the smoke. He tried pity next. I am losing everything. You are losing what was never yours to keep, I said. Including me. He swallowed. His hands trembled. She is gone, he whispered. She left when the listing went live. She said she did not sign up for this. I felt nothing sharp, only the dull ache of recognition. People who build their happiness on other people's silence always panic when silence ends. It is not the loss that undoes them. It is the echo. He dropped onto the edge of a chair and stared at the floor. Do you remember the day we chose the beach house? He asked. You said the sound of the tide made you brave. I was brave, I said. You mistook kindness for softness. He nodded once, a tiny movement, like a person finally reading the last page of a book he pretended to understand. What happens to me now? He asked. You hire counsel, I said. You honor the agreements you signed. You return what you misused. You tell the truth to the people you lied to. And then you learn to live on a smaller stage. He stood. And you? I live, I said simply. He looked at me a long time. For a heartbeat, I saw the man I had chosen in a better year. The one who held my hand at a winter market and promised we would always build together. Then the image flickered and went out. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Goodbye, Alicia, he said and left. I did not cry. Not because I am stronger than tears. Because the tide had already gone out. The weeks that followed did not explode. They settled. The group text that used to orbit his stories found a new center. Friends reached out not to choose sides, but to bring soup and strong coffee and better laughter. My sister came over on Sundays. We sat on the floor with albums spread between us and threw away the photos that lied. We framed the ones that told the truth. The sale proceeds from the beach house cleared into my account. I used a portion to pay off debts I should never have carried alone. I used a portion to hire a contractor. I signed a small lease on a studio with big windows and a door that locks. On the day it opened, the sunlight laid itself across the floor like a promise. I put a kettle on the sill and a map on the wall and a whiteboard where a future could get specific. My name went on the lease. Only my name. Marcus's name began to travel in different circles. He stayed at a friend's spare room for a while. He took a leave of absence from work. He attended 2 counseling sessions and then stopped going. He told people he needed time. Time does not heal lies. Time only reveals who wants to stop telling them. One morning, an envelope arrived by courier. Inside was a check. Full reimbursement for the expenditures I had documented as marital misappropriation. A short note sat on top. I was wrong, it read in his hand. 1 sentence. No drama. No excuses. The check cleared. It did not buy forgiveness. It did mark an ending. I kept one ritual from the life that burned down. On the first Saturday of each month, I drive to the ocean. Not to the beach house. That address belongs to New Stories now. I go to a public shoreline where the sand is always a little messy and the gulls argue like old relatives. I stand at the edge where the water coldly negotiates with the earth, and I listen. The tide keeps its own calendar. It does not ask permission to arrive. It does not apologize when it leaves. It moves because that is what truth does when you stop building walls to stop it. It moves. If you are listening to me now with your hand on your own doorknob, wondering if you should open it, hear this. You do not have to light a match to end a lie. You only have to pull the curtain back and let daylight in. Protect yourself first. Document everything. Speak to people who know where the law lives. Choose actions that discipline the story and honor your safety. You can be exact and you can be kind. Those qualities are not enemies. They are sisters. And they will carry you. I will not tell you that courage feels good. It rarely does. Courage feels like a clean cut when you were taught to live with 1,000 small bruises. But the bruise goes quiet. The cut heals honest. The last time I saw Marcus was at a mutual friend's barbecue in late summer. He stood by the fence with a paper plate and a plastic fork and nodded at me. I nodded back. There was no soundtrack. No spike in the air. Just the smallest of acknowledgments between two people who finally understood the cost of pretending. As the evening softened, someone turned on string lights. They wove gold through the branches. A little girl ran past with a sparkler and wrote her name in quick bright letters that disappeared and still mattered. I smiled. When I left, several friends walked me to my car. We hugged the uncomplicated kind. I drove home with the windows down and the night steady around me. My phone buzzed once with a text from my sister. "Proud of you," it said. "Next Ocean Day I am coming." "Come," I typed back. "There is room." Before I end, I want to speak to the part of you that is still waiting for permission. You are allowed to leave the room that shrinks you. You are allowed to reclaim the house with your own key. You are allowed to write your name on the lease, the deed, the story. You are allowed to make a plan that is careful and lawful and yours. You are allowed to let the truth do the work. If this story found you at the right time, tell me one step you will take this week. Put it in the comments so someone who reads after you sees a path. Tell me where you are listening from. Tell me what the tide sounds like where you stand. And if you want more stories where women choose themselves without burning the world down, stay with me. Subscribe. Share this with a friend who needs a map. We will keep telling the truth out loud. We will keep putting the right names back on the right doors. We will keep meeting the tide at the edge and letting it move. Because it will. Because it should. Because you can.